On a bright summer morning outside Portland, sunlight spilled across the old rail yard like liquid gold, warming the steel tracks that hadn't sung in years. The city hummed softly in the distance, unaware that an ordinary day was about to split open into something unforgettable. A 7-year-old girl in a pastel pink jacket stood near the edge of the yard, her brown boots brushing through wild grass as she chased butterflies, blissfully unaware of the danger sleeping beneath the summer heat. She didn't notice the faint vibrations under the rails, or the silence rising like a held breath. But two creatures did. Two massive German shepherds, elite police dog partners trained to sense what humans couldn't, lifted their heads in perfect unison, ears sharp, bodies stiffening with instinct. They weren't reacting to noise. They were reacting to a presence, a warning. Nearby, Officer Daniel Miller felt the shift too, the way the breeze faltered, the way the air thickened with unseen urgency. Something was coming, something buried, waiting, watching. Then Max and Rocky growled, low, steady. Their gaze locked onto the girl in pink, still unaware, while the summer wind carried a scent that made their training ignite like a spark. And under Portland's gentle morning sun, the first signal of a hidden terror began to rise from the shadows. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Summer in Portland could be gentle, but not today. The morning sun bore down with a fierce golden insistence, baking the edges of the quiet suburbs and turning the abandoned rail yard into a shimmering field of heat. The sky stretched cloudless and sharp, so blue it looked freshly polished. Even the breeze seemed exhausted, barely lifting the weeds that grew wild around the rusted tracks. On the outskirts of this sleepy edge of the city, where warehouses sagged from age and distant traffic hummed like a restless tide, Officer Daniel Miller stepped out of the precinct to begin what he assumed would be a routine patrol. Daniel was 34, tall with a sturdy build earned from years of fieldwork, his jawline square and shadowed faintly with the stubble he never quite managed to shave clean. His short brown hair was already damp with sweat, and his deep-set gray eyes, usually calm and patient, held the quiet alertness of someone who had seen too much tragedy to ever fully relax. He had a reputation in the Portland Police Department as fair but relentless, shaped in part by losing a fellow officer during a pursuit 5 years earlier. Since then, vigilance lived in him like a second heartbeat. At his side trotted his two partners, Max and Rocky, German Shepherd K9s, trained to a level most officers only dreamed of. Max, the elder at 7 years old, had a thick black and tan coat, sharp amber eyes, and a calm, grave expression that made him look almost philosophical. Rocky, younger and more muscular at 5 years old, carried an eager energy in the way his tail swayed and his paws hit the ground with confidence. Both wore black harnesses with bold white lettering that read, "Police Dog," the straps snug against their strong chests. After years of working with Daniel, they moved with the unspoken coordination of creatures fused by instinct and loyalty. Their patrol took them past old storage lots, along empty fences, and finally toward the forgotten rail yard, a place locals avoided, unless they were up to something. Daniel wasn't worried. He came here often, though the silence always felt a little too thick, like the world was holding its breath. "All right, boys," he murmured, adjusting his grip on the leashes. "Quick sweep, then we head back. Maybe even grab breakfast if you behave." But as he stepped onto the cracked pavement near the tracks, Rocky froze. His ears shot up, muscles locking into rigid attention. Max mirrored him instantly, body stiffening, tail lifting, nostrils flaring as he sniffed the hot summer air. Daniel blinked in surprise. "Hey now," he said with a half-laugh. "What's gotten into whoa?" The leashes jerked violently. Both German shepherds pulled forward with sudden force, nearly yanking him off balance. They growled, low, dangerous, synchronized, something Daniel had never heard from them at the same time. "Easy, boys, easy!" But neither dog listened. They dragged him toward the tracks, toward the blistering steel rails stretching into the distance. The heat shimmered around them like a veil. Then Daniel heard it. At first it was nothing more than a thin thread of sound, quivering in the air, almost swallowed by the wind. But then it came again. A faint, trembling cry. A child's cry. Daniel's heart kicked hard in his chest. Max lunged forward, Rocky sprinting beside him, both barking now, urgent, frantic, desperate. Daniel ran after them, boots pounding against the dry earth as the cries sharpened into unmistakable sobs. "Hold on!" he shouted into the empty yard, though he saw no one. "We're coming!" They rounded a slight bend in the tracks, and Daniel stopped dead. There, lying directly across the rail, was a little girl no older than 7. Her delicate features twisted in terror as she struggled uselessly against the ropes binding her wrists behind her back. She wore a pastel pink summer jacket over a white t-shirt, blue jeans smudged with dirt, and small brown low-ankle boots that trembled as she kicked for freedom. Sunlight caught in her pale blonde hair, making it appear almost silver around her small, frightened face. Tears streaked down her rosy cheeks, and her wide blue eyes reflected a terror Daniel felt punch straight through him. "Oh God," he breathed. Max and Rocky darted in front of her, planting themselves like living shields, barking at the empty horizon as if daring the world to come any closer. Daniel dropped to his knees beside her. "Sweetheart, I've got you," he said, voice steady despite his racing pulse. "I'm going to get you out. Just hold still." But before he could reach for his knife, a sound rolled through the summer air. Deep, metallic, distant but growing. A train. Daniel turned his head slowly toward the far end of the tracks. Sunlight glinted off the metal engine as it began to round the distant curve, heading straight for them. The rails vibrated beneath him. The horn blared, a long, thunderous warning. "No, no, no!" Daniel gasped, grabbing the knife from his belt. The girl screamed. Max and Rocky snarled, bracing themselves over her tiny body. Daniel's hands trembled as he cut at the rope. The train thundered closer. Heat radiated off the rails. The horn roared again. He had seconds, only seconds, and if he failed, all 3 of them, Max, Rocky, and the little girl, would die. The chapter ends here, with the train bearing down and no time left. The train's roar faded behind them, but Daniel Miller's pulse still hammered hard enough to shake his ribs as he dropped into the tall summer grass, with the little girl clinging to him as if afraid he might vanish. The scorching Portland sun pressed down on the scene, turning the grasses gold and the rails above them into molten ribbons. Max and Rocky burst from the embankment beside him, Max landing with a heavy thud and Rocky skidding slightly in the dry dust, both German shepherds panting but instantly alert again. Their police dog harnesses glinted under the harsh light as they circled protectively around Daniel and the child. The girl trembled violently against his chest, her small fingers digging into the fabric of his uniform. "It's okay," Daniel whispered, though his own breath was still uneven. "You're safe now. I've got you." She looked up at him with wide blue eyes, still glossy with tears, her soft blonde hair tangled from the fall and sticking slightly to her pastel pink summer jacket. Dirt smudged her white shirt and jeans, but she seemed unhurt except for the angry red welts around her wrists where the rope had dug deep. I thought no one would find me, she sobbed, voice fractured by terror. Max stepped closer and gently licked her hand, his amber eyes warm and full of the steady reassurance only a seasoned K9 could give. Rocky pressed his muscular body against her legs, as though forming a barrier made of fur and loyalty. Unexpectedly, the tension broke for a moment when Lily let out a tiny, shaky giggle, half fear, half relief, as Rocky nosed her boot. The sound loosened something in Daniel's chest. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked softly. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily Parker." Her voice shook again. "I'm 7. Daniel nodded, forcing calm into every word. "I'm Officer Daniel. These two are Max and Rocky. They're here to help you." Lily looked at the dogs again. Max stoic and focused, Rocky more expressive, ears flicking back and forth. And her breathing slowed just enough for her to raise one trembling hand to touch Max's fur. "There was a man," she said quietly. "A bad man." Daniel already suspected as much, but he let her speak at her pace. "Can you tell me what he looked like?" Lily's face pinched with fear. "He wore a long coat and a mask. I never saw his face. He tied me there and said—" Her breath hitched, and she pressed her forehead into Daniel's shoulder. He rubbed small circles on her back, something he'd learned years ago when calming panicked children. "It's okay," he murmured. "What did he say?" Lily swallowed. "He said the train would take me away forever if I screamed." Max growled, low, defensive, instinctive. Rocky mirrored him, ears flattening, eyes narrowing toward the tracks as though expecting the masked man to appear at any moment. Daniel steadied his voice. "You're safe now. He can't hurt you anymore." But Lily shook her head slowly. "There's something else." She pointed a small, trembling finger toward the far bend in the tracks, where sunlight shimmered off weeds and rusted metal. "He hid a black bag there. He said it would make the train stop." Daniel's stomach tightened. A chill slid down his spine despite the heat. Before he could ask more, Max suddenly snapped his head in the direction Lily pointed, ears rigid, body tense. Rocky followed a split second later, tugging his leash so hard Daniel had to plant his boots firmly. The dogs knew something dangerous. "All right," Daniel said firmly. "We're going to check it out." He lifted Lily gently onto her feet. She wobbled, so he steadied her with one hand, while Rocky stepped in close, as if volunteering to be her support beam. "Stay behind us," Daniel instructed. "Don't wander. Max and Rocky will keep you safe." The trio, one officer, one terrified child, and 2 battle-trained K9s, moved carefully across the sun-baked gravel. The heat shimmered above the metal rails, distorting the air like ripples on water. Max took the lead, his paws soundless despite the rocky terrain, nose low as he sifted scents with sharp, calculated precision. Rocky stayed slightly behind him, but ahead of Daniel and Lily, forming a staggered formation they had trained for, a protective wedge. When they reached the curve, Max stopped so abruptly that dust rose around his paws. Rocky stiffened beside him and began to paw aggressively at a mound of rocks near a splintered wooden beam. Daniel crouched, pulling the rocks aside until a corner of black nylon emerged. A duffel bag, wedged deliberately beneath the debris. Heat radiated off it, but something colder seemed to pulse deep inside Daniel's chest. "That's it," Lily whispered, voice barely audible. "That's the bag." Daniel pulled it free and unzipped it just enough to see what was inside. His breath caught. A metal device with wires. Compact. Too clean. Too intentional. Not just a discarded object. Something designed. Something dangerous. "Jesus," Daniel muttered. He immediately reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Miller. I need—" Static exploded into his ear. He tapped the device, adjusted it, tried again. More static. No signal. The radio wasn't dead. It was being blocked. Lily's grip tightened on his sleeve. Her voice trembled with a new kind of terror. He said if anyone found the bag." She swallowed hard. "He said he would come back." Max and Rocky whipped around at the same instant, ears snapping upright, bodies braced, staring into the sunlit emptiness behind them. Something was out there. Watching. Waiting. Coming closer. The chapter ends here. The sunlight dimmed the deeper they moved into the small forest, the air shifting from scorching summer heat to a cooler, earthy hush beneath the canopy. Daniel Miller held Lily securely in his arms as Max and Rocky led the way. Two powerful German shepherds moving with the precision of animals trained to read danger in every blade of grass. Rays of sun refracted through the leaves like shards of gold, illuminating Lily's pastel pink jacket with an almost fragile glow. Her blonde hair clung slightly to her cheeks, and her blue eyes, though still rimmed with fear, flicked around with the curiosity of a child trying to understand a nightmare. The forest floor crackled beneath their boots and paws. Max sniffed low, following a scent heavy enough to anchor his focus. Rocky, more reactive, swung his head back and forth, ensuring nothing approached from behind. Their harnesses, stamped boldly with police dog, shifted softly with each movement. Daniel whispered, "Easy, boys," though his nerves were taut as wire. Something about the black bag, about the silence that seemed to swallow the air, told him they were stepping deeper into something far more planned than a simple kidnapping. After another 100 yards, Max halted. His body stiffened, tail straight, ears pointed. Rocky mirrored him, lowering into a guarded stance. Daniel followed their gaze. A weather-beaten wooden shack leaned crookedly between two moss-covered trees, its roof sagging inward and its single window cracked like a spiderweb. The wooden boards were dark with age, nearly consumed by vines. "What is that?" Lily whispered, burying her face against Daniel's shoulder. "Someplace we don't want to be," he murmured. He lowered her gently behind him. Max moved silently to the door, sniffing at the frame, while Rocky prowled the perimeter. When Daniel nudged the door open, the hinges screeched, echoing through the forest like a warning. Inside, the shack was colder than it had any right to be. Dust floated lazily in the thin shafts of light piercing through the broken window. The air smelled of old rope, damp wood, and something metallic. Daniel's jaw clenched as he swept his flashlight across the room. A coil of thick rope, identical to the one used on Lily, lay haphazardly on a small table. Next to it were railway maps, scribbled over with red markers. A signal diagram lay open, circled in several places. But the worst was the wall. Scratched into the wood with something sharp were the words, "She was only the beginning." Lily whimpered behind him. Daniel turned immediately, instinctively reaching to comfort her. The dogs stiffened. Rocky let out a sudden, ferocious growl that vibrated through the narrow shack. Max rushed toward Lily, positioning himself between her and the doorway. Daniel spun around a time to see a figure at the tree line. A man, mid-40s, unkempt, tall but slightly hunched, with oily brown hair tied back loosely and a patchwork beard that covered half his drawn, pale face. His clothes were filthy, a long gray coat stained with dirt, mud-crusted boots, and gloves with the fingers cut off. His eyes, sunken, frantic, flicked between Daniel, Lily, and the dogs. He moved like someone tormented by exhaustion and days of running. His shoulders twitched in nervous spasms. "Stop right there!" Daniel shouted. The man staggered back, then bolted into the underbrush with a clumsy burst of desperation. Max leapt forward. Rocky shot out beside him. "Go!" Daniel commanded. The chase tore through the forest, branches snapping underfoot. Max took the left flank, silent, quick, calculating, while Rocky took the direct pursuit, barking with sharp, relentless warning. Daniel sprinted after them, keeping Lily behind a fallen log for safety, his breath burning in his lungs. The man's uneven gait slowed him just enough for Max to intercept. The elder German shepherd lunged in front of him, forcing the stranger to skid to a stop. Rocky barked so sharply, the forest seemed to shake. The man raised trembling hands. Don't let them bite," he gasped. "Please!" Daniel arrived seconds later, weapon drawn. "On your knees!" The man obeyed, collapsing rather than kneeling with control. When the dogs backed off slightly, though both kept their teeth bared, Daniel secured the man's wrists. Up close, the stranger's features were clearer. Rough skin tanned unevenly by the sun, deep lines carved around his eyes from years of stress, and fingers marked with small burns and cuts. His voice trembled with fear and guilt. I'm not who you think." "Start talking," Daniel demanded. "Now." The man swallowed painfully. "My name is Raymond Cole. I was a signal engineer. Worked for Rail West Solutions." Daniel knew the name, one of the private contractors occasionally hired for upgrades. The man continued. They built a device. A dangerous one. I helped design it." His breath hitched. "They wanted to use it, to shut down entire sections of the railway system, switch signals, scramble everything. Perfect cover for transporting things without notice." Daniel's stomach tightened. "You stole it?" Raymond nodded miserably. "I had to. They were going to use it soon. And when they realized I'd taken it, they came after me." His eyes welled with a haunted kind of fear. "I thought if I used the girl, they'd think I still followed their orders. They'd leave me alive long enough to—" "You used a child," Daniel snapped. "I didn't hurt her," Raymond cried. "I swear, I just needed them to think I was still loyal." Max growled as if disgusted. Rocky barked once, sharp, condemning. Raymond looked toward the ground, defeated. "They're not done," he whispered. "They're coming for the device. For me. And for what's hidden under the rail yard." "What's hidden?" Daniel demanded. Raymond's tune. Lips trembled. Before he could answer, Max suddenly threw his head back and let out a long, urgent howl. Rocky yanked hard on his leash, muscles tensing like drawn steel. Both stared toward the open forest, the direction of the abandoned rail yard. Daniel felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. Something was there. Something waiting. Something terrible. The chapter ends here. The heat of late afternoon settled over the rail yard like a heavy molten blanket, thick enough to make the air shimmer above the rusted rails. Sweat trickled down Daniel Miller's temples as he studied the ground where Max and Rocky had stopped, both German shepherds, rigid with instinctive tension. Their police dog harnesses were dulled by dust, their muscles coiled as if they already knew what lay beneath the debris. Daniel knelt beside the heap of scrap metal and corroded steel plates, ignoring the way the sun scorched the back of his neck. "This is where?" he asked, glancing at Raymond Cole, who had been forced to sit under the shade of a broken freight container. Raymond's posture sagged, his gaunt face tight with exhaustion and guilt. He nodded. "The hatch is under this pile. They reopened the tunnel months ago." He swallowed. "It's where they hide things, store them until transport." His voice cracked with a mixture of fear and shame. "You don't understand, officer. They're not afraid of killing people. The chaos would only help them." Daniel didn't respond. He motioned for Max and Rocky to stand back before signaling two uniformed officers to help clear the metal sheet. The officers, both young and visibly tense, worked quickly. One, Officer Brent Holloway, was a lean man in his late 20s with sandy brown hair and freckles scattered across his sunburned nose. Known for his eager nature and a habit of over-explaining things when nervous, Brent kept glancing at the trees as if expecting an ambush. The other, Officer Carla Ruiz, was a compact, strong woman in her early 30s, with dark hair tied into a tight braid and a calm, sharp-eyed focus honed from years growing up in a rough neighborhood in East Portland. Together, the two lifted the final metal sheet, revealing a large, square hatch. Its edges were rusted, but the steel locks had been recently broken. Daniel wiped his hands on his pants and nodded for Brent and Carla to help him lift it. As the hatch creaked upward, Max leaned in, sniffing aggressively, tail rigid. Rocky let out a soft, but unmistakably distressed whine, his ears flattening. A cold gust of stale air rose from below, then came another sound, thin, trembling, unmistakable. A child's sob, and another, soft, labored breaths. Daniel's heart clenched. "There are kids down there," Brent whispered, his voice cracking. Before Daniel could climb down, his radio crackled to life. "All units, suspects spotted on Old Timber Bridge. 2 masked individuals armed and moving toward the structural center." It was dispatch, thin and unstable, cutting in and out. "Possible connection to Daniel Miller's case. Proceed immediately." Daniel cursed under his breath. He didn't want to leave the hatch, but protocol and urgency pulled him toward the bridge. "Carla, Brent, hold the perimeter. No one goes in the tunnel until SWAT arrives." Brent nodded so fast he nearly stumbled. Carla's expression hardened with determination. Daniel turned to Max and Rocky. "With me." The 2 K9s moved in perfect unison, their bodies low and urgent. Lily, who had been sheltered inside a patrol car nearby, pressed her small hand to the window as Daniel passed. Her blue eyes trembled with fear, but Daniel gave her a quick nod, "Trust me," before sprinting toward the convoy. The drive to Old Timber Bridge took less than 5 minutes, but the tension made it feel longer. The bridge towered over a narrow, rocky creek, its steel beams rusted from decades of weather. A small SWAT element was already in place, 3 officers in tactical gear. The leader introduced himself quickly, Sergeant Owen Price, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 40s. He had close-cropped silvering hair, sharp blue eyes, and a serious, steady manner shaped by surviving a hostage crisis early in his career. Without wasting time, he signaled Daniel to his flank. Together, the group advanced. Two masked men stood in the center of the bridge. Both wore black jackets and gloves, their bodies lean and athletic, suggesting military or private contractor training. The taller of the two held a small device in his hand, a remote with a blinking red light. He raised it slightly as the officers approached. "One press," the man said, voice smooth but chilling through the mask. "And every rail signal in this district collapses. Trains collide. Chaos everywhere. Enough confusion for us to move our shipment underground, without anyone noticing." Daniel's stomach sank. That confirmed everything Raymond had said. Max growled, teeth bared. Rocky scraped his paws across the metal surface of the bridge, ready to spring. "You won't get the chance," Sergeant Price warned, raising his rifle. But the masked man laughed. "Try me." The tension snapped like lightning. Before anyone could blink, Max bolted forward, a black and tan blur of controlled fury. He lunged straight for the man's arm, jaws clamping down with perfect precision. The remote flew out of the attacker's grip, skidding across the bridge before tumbling over the edge into the creek below. Simultaneously, Rocky charged the second masked man, forcing him back and preventing him from drawing a knife hidden in his coat. The bridge groaned under the chaos of bodies. SWAT officers surged forward, wrestling the suspects to the metal floor. Sergeant Price cuffed the man whose remote Max had knocked loose. As he did, the masked man let out a slow, sinister chuckle. "You think that was the whole operation? The real cargo is still beneath your feet." Daniel's blood ran cold. Beneath their feet, the tunnel, the children. He grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, we need—" Static. Then a faint voice. "Movement in the tunnel. Unknown count. Possible hostile." The message dissolved. Max let out a low, vibrating growl. Rocky stepped beside him, muscles trembling with readiness. Daniel stared toward the distant rail yard, fear curling in his gut. Something was down there, waiting, and he needed to reach it before it was too late. The chapter ends here. The last light of day spread across the rail yard like a golden veil, softening the harsh edges of rusted metal and sun-bleached wood. The sky above Portland glowed orange and rose, the kind of sunset that made the world seem briefly gentle, even though Daniel Miller knew they were standing on the edge of something far from gentle. Max and Rocky stood beside him, the black lettering police dog across their harnesses catching the dying light. Their fur bristled with a mixture of fatigue and determination, their bodies ready to plunge into danger again if needed. Behind them, officers from both the local precinct and the SWAT team gathered, exchanging short, tense murmurs. The heavy steel hatch, unearthed earlier beneath piles of scrap, waited open like a dark mouth yawning into the unknown. Sergeant Owen Price stood nearby, his broad silhouette outlined against the sunset. Dust clung to his tactical vest and his silver-threaded hair. Despite his steady composure, his eyes narrowed with lingering worry. "We don't know how many are down there," he said in his gravelly voice, "or if those suspects left traps behind." Daniel nodded, gripping his flashlight. "That's why Max and Rocky go first." The two German shepherds responded as if understanding every word. Max, older and wiser, stepped toward the hatch without hesitation, tail lifted with solemn purpose. Rocky followed, a bit more energetic but no less focused, his deep brown eyes alert and already sweeping the shadows. The officers lowered a metal ladder. Daniel descended right after the dogs. The tunnel air shifted instantly, cold, damp, tinged with the scent of old concrete and something faintly metallic. Their flashlights illuminated walls lined with forgotten tools, rusted rails, and graffiti from decades past. Max halted. Rocky froze beside him. A sound drifted toward them, soft, broken, trembling. A sniffle, a quiet sob, then another. Daniel raised his voice gently. "Police, we're here to help. It's safe now." He wasn't prepared for the silence that followed, then the sudden, desperate shuffle of small feet. 4 children emerged from the darker section of the tunnel, huddled together like frightened birds. They ranged from about 4 to 9 years old. The oldest, a thin boy with sandy hair and pale skin, stepped forward cautiously. His t-shirt was torn at the sleeve, and dust smeared across his cheek. His voice quavered. "We heard the trains. We thought we'd never get out." Max approached slowly, lowering his head in a gesture of reassurance. The youngest, a little girl with curly brown hair and tear-stained cheeks, reached out and clung to Max's neck. Rocky crouched, allowing 2 of the others to wrap their arms around him. The scene softened the hardened faces of every officer present. Daniel knelt to inspect the kids for injuries. Nothing severe, just exhaustion, dehydration, and fear. "You're safe now," he promised. "We're getting you home." Officers lowered blankets and water bottles. Sergeant Price helped lift each child to the surface, his normally stern expression cracking into something gentle the moment he touched their trembling hands. Back on the surface, the summer twilight had settled. A soft breeze carried the scent of cedar and warm asphalt. As the children stepped into the open air, they blinked like they had forgotten what daylight looked like. Daniel stood back, allowing the medical staff to check them, while Max and Rocky sat on either side of him, sentinels of fur and loyalty. Meanwhile, detectives arrived to collect the real signal-disrupting device hidden deeper in the tunnel. It was a compact object with a sleek metallic casing, clearly engineered for precision sabotage. Detective Marianne Foster, a meticulous woman in her late 30s with tightly curled auburn hair and sharp hazel eyes, handled the device with careful gloves. Known for her analytical mind and uncompromising work ethic, she examined it closely. "This is enough to take out half the regional network," she muttered. "You stopping this? That's not luck. That's good policing." Daniel shook his head and gestured to the dogs. "Not me. Them." Later, as the last traces of sunlight surrendered to dusk, the rail yard filled with reunions. Parents rushed forward, some crying, some collapsing with relief. A mother with dark blonde hair and a slender frame sprinted toward the group, her summer dress fluttering behind her. She was Sarah Parker, Lily's mother. Her fair skin flushed red from running, her green eyes glossy with panic and hope. When she reached Lily, still wearing her pastel pink jacket, white shirt, jeans, and brown boots, she fell to her knees and wrapped her daughter in trembling arms. "My baby," she whispered again and again. Lily cried into her mother's shoulder, gripping her tightly before turning and darting toward Max and Rocky. She hugged Max first, burying her face in his fur. "You didn't just save me," she said softly. "You saved them, too." Rocky wagged his tail, leaning into her touch. A few days later, the Portland Police Department held a small outdoor ceremony in a sunny courtyard. Summer flowers, daisies and marigolds, lined the edges. Officers gathered with quiet pride. Daniel received a commendation for bravery. Max and Rocky were each awarded a Canine Hero Medal, their harnesses polished, their behavior surprisingly dignified, until they both tried to sniff the treat box at the same time, earning laughter from the whole crowd. That night, Daniel walked the two dogs through a peaceful neighborhood lit by warm streetlights. On a porch ahead, Lily waved her arms. "Hi, Officer Daniel. Hi, Max. Hi, Rocky." Her giddy voice echoed like a promise of better days. Daniel raised a hand. Max barked once. Rocky barked twice. Hope, simple and bright, returned to Portland with them. The chapter ends here. Sometimes, in the heat of an ordinary summer day, miracles don't arrive as beams of light from the heavens. They come on four paws, wearing a police dog badge, guided by a purpose no human fully understands. What happened in that abandoned rail yard wasn't just bravery or instinct. It felt like something greater, something gently placed into motion by the one who watches over the lost, the frightened, and the innocent. In our everyday lives, we don't always notice the quiet warnings, the subtle guidance, or the unexpected protectors God sends our way. Maybe it arrives as a friend calling at the right moment, a stranger offering kindness, or, even more surprising, a pair of loyal dogs who seem to know exactly where hope is hiding. And just like Lily, just like the rescued children, we are all carried through dark tunnels we never meant to enter, until grace reaches in and lifts us back into the light. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Leave a comment about your own moments of faith or miracles. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next story of courage, love, and hope. May God bless you, protect your family, and guide you through every shadow, just as He guided Max, Rocky, and Officer Daniel on that summer day. Amen.